The Spectator, August 1936. We got off the day coach at Trenton, New Jersey, and bought a car for $28.50. It was an 8-year-old Dodge open touring car, and the back seat was full of fallen leaves. A boy who worked for the car dealer drove us to the city hall to get an automobile license, and he said, "The boss chipped the pants off you. You should have got this machine for $20 flat, and it's not worth that." So we started out to tour across America, which is, roughly speaking, a distance of 3,000 miles. I have to tell this because without the car, and without the peculiarly weak insides of that car, we should not have seen a lynching. It was September, and as we drove south, the days were dusty and hot, and the sky was pale. We skidded in dust that was as moving and uncertain as sand, and when we stopped for the night, we scraped it off our faces and shook it from our hair like powder. So finally we thought we'd drive at night, which would be cooler anyhow, and we wouldn't see the dust coming at us. The beauty of America is its desolation. Once you leave New England and the industrial centers of the East, you feel that no one lives in the country at all. In the South, you see a few people, stationary in the fields, thinking or just standing, and broken shacks where people more or less live, thin people who are accustomed to semi-starvation and crops that never quite pay enough. The towns or villages give an impression of belonging to the flies, and it is impossible to imagine that on occasion these languid people move with a furious purpose. We drove through Mississippi at night, trying to get to a town called Columbia, hoping that the hotel would be less slovenly than usual, and that there would be some food available. The car broke down. We did everything we could think of doing, which wasn't much, and once or twice it panted wearily, and then there was silence. We sat in it, and cursed, and wondered what to do. No one passed. There was no reason for anyone to pass. The roads are bad, and mosquitoes sing too close the minute you stop moving. And the only reason to go to a small town in Mississippi is to sell something, or try to sell, and that doesn't happen late at night. It was 30 miles or more to Columbia, and we were tired. If it hadn't been for the mosquitoes, we should simply have slept in the car and hoped that someone would drive past in the morning. As it was, we smoked cigarettes and swatted at ourselves and swore and hated machinery and talked about the good old days when people got about in stagecoaches. It didn't make things better, and we had fallen into a helpless silence when we heard a car coming. From some distance we could hear it banging over the ruts in the road. We climbed out and stood so the headlights would find us, and presently a truck appeared, swaying crazily. It stopped, and a man leaned out. As a matter of fact, he sagged out the side, and he had a bottle in one hand, waving it at us. "Anything wrong?" he said. We explained about the car and asked for a lift. He pulled his head into the truck and consulted with the driver. Then he reappeared and said they'd give us a lift to Columbia later, but first they were going to a lynching, and if we didn't mind the detour. We climbed into the truck. "Northerners?" the driver said. "Where did y'all come from?" We said that we had driven down from Trenton in New Jersey, and he said, "In that old piece of tin?" referring to our car. The other man wiped the neck of the bottle by running his finger around the inside of it and offered it to me. "Do you good," he said. "Best corn outside Kentucky." It was no time to refuse hospitality. I drank some of the stuff, which had a taste like gasoline, except that it was like gasoline on fire, and he handed it to my friend Joe, who also drank some and coughed, and they both laughed. I said timidly, "Who's getting lynched?" "Some goddamn nigger, name of Hyacinth, as I recollect." "What did he do?" "He got after a white woman." I began to think with doubt and disgust of this explanation, so I asked who the woman was. "Some widow woman, owns land down towards Natchez." "How old is she?" Joe asked. Joe was in doubt, too. "Christ, she's so old she ought to have died. She's about 40 or 50. "And the boy?" "You mean that nigger Hyacinth?" I said yes, and was told that Hyacinth was about 19, though you couldn't always tell with niggers. Sometimes they looked older than they were, and sometimes younger. "What happened?" Joe said. "How do you know she got raped?" "She says so," the driver said. "She's been screaming off her head about it ever since this afternoon. She run down to the next plantation and screamed and said, 'Hang that man,' and she said it was Hyacinth. She ought to have knowed him anyhow. He was working for her some time back." "How do you mean? Was he a servant?" "No," the driver said. "He was working on her land on shares. Most of her croppers have moved off by now. She don't give them any keep, and they can't make the crop if they don't get nothing to eat all winter. She sure is cruel hard on niggers, that woman. She's got a bad name for being a mean one."